everybody. Welcome back to Spilling the Teeth. This is the podcast where we talk honestly about what's happening in dentistry, behind the scenes, between the meetings, and sometimes between clenched teeth. Today's episode is about leadership, but not the buzzword version. We are talking about real leadership. What happens when teams are burned out, when culture starts to crack, when patients experience quietly suffers and nobody even knows about it. But dentistry is incredibly it's incredible and it's clinical and it's all these other things. But operationally, most dentists were never trained to lead people. And it's that simple. And yet leadership is now the single biggest driver of team retention, patient trust, and whether a practice actually scales or stalls. So today, we are talking about leading with purpose and what this actually looks like in the real world. And I could not ask for a better guest for this conversation. So if you work in dentistry and you've ever touched the DSO world or even thought about touching it, you already know this name. Brian Colao is the leader of the dental and DSO practice at Dykema, one of the most influential law firms in healthcare and dentistry. He's advised hundreds of dental organizations from single location practices all the way up to some of the largest DSOs in the country. He's in the rooms where growth decisions happen. He's in the rooms where culture problems surface. And importantly, he's one of the few people in our industry who talks openly about leadership, inclusion, and people, not just transactions and spreadsheets. So Brian also serves on the board of Women in DSO and is a strong advocate for inclusive leadership and building organizations people actually want to work for. Brian, welcome to Spilling the Teeth.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for having me here. And, it's always a pleasure to spend some time with you and talk about, my life's work, which is DSOs basically and dental stuff.
Amen. So it's always fun to hang out, man. And we never get enough time to do this. So this is great to actually lock away some time for this. So I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So let's get right into it. So Brian, you see more dental organizations than I think almost anybody. When you zoom out, what is broken right now when it comes to team dynamics and leadership in dentistry?
Yeah, I mean, this is year 31 for me. I mean, it's getting a little depressing
That's
to
it.
hear this long, but on the other hand, I have seen like just about all of it. And, there's a lot of, there's a lot of struggles right now, at organizations. And I think culture is a big one. There's a variety of, we came off, as you know, the biggest consolidation period in the history of dentistry, if we were talking about 2018, 19, after COVID 20 and 21. And a lot of people really organizations rushed to acquire things. It was just an insatiable appetite to acquire things without knowing necessarily everything about what they were acquiring. And as the analogy goes, Ryan, if you just start eating stuff like Cookie Monster and you're just eating everything, you get indigestion. I mean, yeah, like you just, if you without thinking it through. And I think that, the analogy was a really good one I give to a lot of my clients and people I talk to is, the industry a bit has indigestion now. They're now trying to assimilate things that, they gobbled up without, in a lot of cases, I mean, to be honest, we're talking about former leaders. I'll be in an organization and the team that's there now is doing, is trying to, assimilate things that prior leadership did. There were some retirements during COVID. There were some unfortunate leadership teams that just got changed out. There were some people that resigned, left, so it's not uncommon in a lot of cases. There are some organizations that, they've had the same steady leadership the whole way through. Others have changed their leadership, but they are trying to, assimilate or, deal with some indigestion that was caused over the last 5 years. So, that's a big part of it. So my point, I guess, because you were saying is why the culture might be broken is they bought up a whole bunch of disparate offices without really figuring out, are they a good fit or not? Or maybe some people, a lot of former business development people that are no longer in business development,
Yeah.
thought, this is a good idea. What does the saying go? Damn the torpedoes. I don't care. Let's just buy this thing and worry about it later. Well, now we're worrying about it later. Now we got some things that maybe don't fit the way, they should have fit or we would have wanted them to fit. And now we got to make them fit. I mean, the money has changed hands. The money's been wired. We've acquired, these assets, and now we just kind of got to make it work. Maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe if we did a little more diligence or asked a little more questions or moved a little slower, we would not have done these deals. But the reality is we did these deals and we got this stuff. And that has created, cultural issues. And it's created, organizations, some of them operate on different operating systems and different situations and different value systems. They came up under this value. And now you got to try to meld those together and different personality types. And as a result, it's hard for everybody to just seamlessly be rowing, in the same direction. And you've got to deal with that. At the same time, certain organizations were unable due to some situations to be as transparent as they needed to be about about leadership and what they were doing and what was going to happen. Or
Yeah.
maybe,
Surprise.
again, they thought they were going to get one thing and then due to some changes in leadership, something else is happening now. So this is the biggest thing because in order to be successful, everybody's got to be rowing the same way. Everybody's got to buy into the culture. I mean, if I'm taking it even back further, there's got to be a culture. I mean, there's some organizations that are just, I use the term, they get mad at me sometimes, duct tape. They've duct taped it together and there's no real definitive culture to speak of. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but there's no one's really worked out what the
Makes
culture is
itself.
going to be or what the mission is. So one, you got to identify what is the mission and what is the culture. And then you got to get everybody to buy in and you got to get everybody rowing the same way. So there's 3 or 4 steps. And unfortunately, there's some organizations that haven't even fixed step 1 yet.
Interesting. Yeah, it's actually so similar to the startup universe in technology because I think that a lot of startups, like I'm one of them, that when you're acquired, you kind of think that everything is just going to work out and be very, very easy. And no matter what, there's just cultural differences, especially when there's differences in like evolution, right? Some people have evolved to, hey, I'm this big organization and I have systems everywhere, and hell, I didn't even know what SOPs were. When I joined the thing, we didn't write stuff down. We just knew it, right? And now it's all about SOPs and all about process. And you have people that are in charge of the process. And it's just really odd. It's just, and you either get used to that or you reject it like a bad organ and you have some problems. And I guess
But
with
the
that being
SOPs,
said, yeah,
Ryan, can't run the thing. What's
you're
got to
right.
run the
Good call.
thing is the mission and the culture. Because sometimes there's situations that there's no SOP for or nobody thought of, but you know what the mission is and you know why you're here. So even though there's not an SOP for it, you're here and you know what
You
your
do it.
mission is, so you can just do the right thing that's consistent with your culture or your mission. I mean, you can come up with something on the fly when you know what the mission is and what the culture is. You can say, God,
Yeah,
never encountered this before, but based on what our mission is, I
you're
know I
good.
should just do this. Nobody told me, but this is the right way to go. And so that's why I think, SOPs are important. I mean, you can't like just run the thing without any procedures, but you've really got to figure this out. And I've always said this, we were talking about this before we kind of got online and started, recording this. Whenever I start a meeting at my organization, doesn't matter if it's like the senior partner. Sometimes this works best, even though I've got senior people in there where I'm like, does everybody understand why we're here and what we're doing? Like what the purpose of this is? And very often, to the point it doesn't even bother me anymore, I'll be in a meeting with really senior people with decades of experience and they'll say something and I'll be like, no, that's actually not why we're here. So I'm glad I asked that question. So before we spend any time on this meeting, let me tell you why we're here and what we're doing. And then everybody's like, okay, now we understand. So everything that follows can be consistent with the why we're here and what we're doing. I think that's critical in these organizations, the why we're here and what we're doing. And I've spent a lot of time lately, gone to several meetings with some really good leaders in our space. And you can always tell, before they go out there, the why. Like everybody understands why we're here and what we're doing, and it's constantly being reinforced at the highest levels, right all the way down to the lowest level, so that there's no misunderstanding. Because half the problem is if people don't understand why we're here and what we're doing, anything that follows has a risk of just getting off message, messed up, not correct, because you don't fundamentally, it's like a foundation. If you don't get the foundation right, everything's going to break. Like, windows are breaking, glasses breaking, cracks, you can talk talk to a home builder, if the foundation's messed up, what happens? And they're going to list about 200 things for you, all of it. And it's the same thing. The culture in many ways is a foundation of the organization. But the culture starts with not just, oh, we're culture. It's like, no, why are we here? What are we doing? What is our mission? And if everybody understands that, most things that follow are going to be okay. Maybe not perfect, but they're going to be okay. But if people don't understand why we're here and what we're doing, then there's no telling what's going to follow after that.
Yeah. It is so interesting you said it leads perfectly into my next question is, I think, smaller organizations, if you are intentful with what you're doing, it's just easier to get the message out because there's like 7 people, right? Whereas, obviously Heartland or a larger organization like that, I mean, you have to be very purposeful about your culture and your mission. So I guess my question is, are the challenges between DSOs and 1 to 3 location practices like similar? Are they different, or are like all these guys more similar than they think, and they just don't know it?
Well, they're the same, but they're very different in how you sort of communicate it. It's sort of like, what was I going to say? Like, if you and I are down here on Earth, and I don't know, you're in the same apartment complex from me. I'm just making this up, and you live across the hall from me in a condo, and I got to get food and water to you. You have to have food and water. That hasn't changed. But I walk across the thing and I knock the door. You open it up. It takes 30 seconds. It's like not a problem. Now imagine you're on the space station. You still need food and water. Like that hasn't changed. Like there's nothing, and probably you're eating, similar food and water or whatever, but how do I get that to you? Well, now that's an entirely different situation. I used to talk to Stan Bergman about this all the time, many times at Dykema, many private conversations I've had with Stan about this, where I've said, you at Henry Schein, you got 20,000 employees. Like, how do you do it? Because, Stan's culture, he might, if he was here with us, say, what I'm telling people is the same as if you have 7 people. Do the right thing, be honest, be transparent, but when you got 7 people, it's called a team meeting. You just say, hey, everybody, let's have the morning huddle.
It's one
This is
pizza.
what I'm going
Yeah.
to tolerate. This is what I'm not going to tolerate. And, you can reinforce it every day, and you could probably check on them because it's 7 people. If you're the owner, you probably check on 7 people. So if somebody's somehow out of line, it's right in front of you and you can handle it versus, my example of Stan Bergman and Henry Schein got 20,000 employees. There's always probably somebody doing something he don't approve of somewhere. And it's just, you gotta be able to manage that. And, Stan and I have had many conversations, both privately and also, in public forums and podcasts and on stage at Dykema, where he's talked about, you've got to start with the culture, and there can't be an exceptions, and it's got to be transmitted down to the senior leadership, then to the middle leadership, then to the lower and it's just, you've got to make sure that everybody's on, because you can't rely on you. What I'm saying is, if I got 7 people, my force of personality can do it. I got 82 people. This has happened to me in my group. When I had less than 7, I had 2 or 3 people, my personality could just do it. I didn't have to think about SOPs. I could, every day, if I had 3 people on my team, I was talking to those 3 people. So if something happened, we would just make a decision right there as to what we're doing. If I thought somebody was being misguided or getting confused, I could correct it like immediately. Now, in my case, with 82 people, I can't. They're all over the country. They're in different locations. I can't just do this on force of personality. So there's good news and bad news. If you're a solo office and you got 7 people, the bad news, as you said, you don't have a giant HR department. But the good news is, look, your personality, if you know what you're doing and you get everybody on board through force of personality, you can make sure this is okay. You got, like you said, 1,000 offices or something, or 500. Force of personality doesn't do it. I mean, personality can set an example for senior leadership. Then senior leadership sets an example for middle leadership. And then middle leadership sets an example for the rank and file workers. But that's all you can do, is set an example and live by it and walk the walk. And if you say something, make sure your actions are consistent with what you said. But you certainly can't, with thousands of offices and employees, go to every office every day and manage what's happening. So to me, it's sort of like my example of the condo. Everybody needs the same food and water. Like, that's true. But if you're like across from the hall from me, I just walk over and knock on the door. If you're on the space station, it's a problem. And the bigger the organization is, the more it's like the space station, where it's like a logistical challenge. The message is the same. Everybody needs the same thing, but how we transmit that message and make sure everybody gets it. And just like my example of my trip up to the space station, a lot of things can go wrong. Like almost nothing can go wrong with me opening my door and knocking on your door across the hall. I mean, I'm going to get there. But if you're talking about the space station, there's a lot of ways that message can get misguided or lost or not able to get it. And your job as a leader is to make sure, if it's a bigger organization, that that message doesn't get lost. And even though it's got to journey a long way, it's got to pass through a lot of people, it doesn't get diluted. And that's where I think sometimes SOPs come, sometimes just principles come
It
in,
helps.
where you've just got to make sure that, your mission and your message gets to everybody. Because if it doesn't get somewhere, you can't expect somebody to act in accordance with your mission and culture, or even be mad at them for not doing it if the message didn't get down there. If it's pretty clear the message got down there, then yeah, if they're not doing it, you got to take decisive action. But a lot of times the message didn't get there. It just didn't show up. They didn't understand. And we as leaders, hey, that's our responsibility. I mean, they're not paying us, Ryan, to actually like necessarily do all the blocking and tackling work. We're getting paid to lead. And part of leading is making sure that the message gets where it gets. And if there's any problem, if there's a roadblock or a log jam and the message isn't getting through, you got to clear that out.
Yeah, I always think of myself as like chief door kicker in those situations along the way. So with all those
Could
being
be
said,
chief
and you've seen
hugger.
this.
I mean, it just depends. It could be chief door
There you go.
door
That's right.
kicker, could be chief hugger, chief baby kisser. I mean, it could be a lot of different things depending on the organization and who you're dealing with. But your chief messenger, I mean, your chief making sure that message gets there. And I agree. Sometimes your baby have to break down the door. Sometimes it's everything in between, but you got to make sure the message gets through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, without naming names, can you share a real example of a dental organization where culture or leadership became a real issue? And when that happened, were there like any early warning signs that like some of these guys listening can think about?
Yeah, I mean, the first way it sort of happens is inconsistency of the mission of the message. You've got them, and I've talked to some leaders about this like a lot. I remember, I'll quote my good friend Steve Vilt. I remember one time at Dykema, he said, like on stage, there's not a single organization that doesn't have a great mission statement if you read it. Like if you read it out loud, it sounds great, but there's only a small percentage of them that execute it every single time. And in the case of Smile Brands, I had the privilege of just attending their meeting, and they just win award after award of best places to work and everything. And it's no coincidence, because they make sure everybody understands their mission statement, and it's a priority of my friend Steve Built to make sure people follow the mission statement. Like if you don't follow the mission statement and the culture, you're probably not going to have a long career, over there. And they make a point of it, and that's sort of the thing that you have to do. So when I look at organizations, I think your question was, without naming names, things that it's failing, usually there's a mission statement there that somebody has and they're not following it, or they're inconsistently following it. And the first indicator of a problem is turnover, like really like high
There you
turnover.
go.
You start to see, we can't hold on to a hygienist. We can't
They're
hold
not
on to a
believing.
dental assistant. The dentists are leaving all the time. Or even if it's a DSO, the DSO employees are leaving. We're constantly having to hire new people. I mean, that's usually the first indicator, that there's a problem. And then that causes a whole bunch of other organization problems. If you're constantly having to replace people because they're leaving, and you're having turnover and there's no continuity. I mean, it creates problems down at the
Oh,
patient
it's
level, where
awful.
you're a dentist, where nobody wants to be like miss things and fall through the cracks, but it's kind of hard not to miss something when you're
When you
like,
don't know what
we're
you're
on
doing.
our fourth
Yeah.
dentist this year. We had 1 year,
Yeah.
and we're on our fourth dentist. We can't even get this patient. Maybe the patient needs treatment that takes 2 or 3 visits. We can't even get them like to visit 3 without the same dentist. And then something will fall through the cracks, and maybe couple things. I mean, maybe somebody makes a mistake, and that's terrible. And I've seen that happen sometimes in organizations, where somebody makes a mistake, and there's a either a malpractice or a problem issue, and the direct cause is, well, we had such high turnover, we didn't know what we did last month, or we lost something in the translation and something happened. Maybe it's hopefully it's not malpractice, but maybe the patient's just like, dude, this is like my 3rd dentist, in a year. I'm tired of
Creeps
this.
you
Like,
out.
I'm going to go with the same dentist all the time. I don't want to keep re-explaining things. Like, it's
Yeah.
true they haven't made a mistake, but I kind of have to explain everything all the time, and I don't really want to do that. And then the staff is like, hey, I just finally, Dr. Hungate liked me. I had a good, rhythm with him. We were vibing. Everything was going good. Now he's gone. Now, like, this new person's coming. And, 3 times a year, I spend my time to make sure, I understood, what Dr. Hungate wanted. And we were getting along great. And now he's gone. Now I got to start all over again. That becomes frustrating to the staff. And they're like, I want to go somewhere where once I figure out how to work effectively with that person's going to be there for years or something.
Dominoes.
So the ripple effect through the whole thing, you can make a mistake. Patients want to leave. The staff maybe, wants to leave, and it just becomes difficult. It becomes difficult for even the leadership to keep giving the message, because in my example, you might have given the message and somebody may have understood it, but now they're gone and somebody else is there. So it just becomes a cascade or a ripple of problems when you start turning over. But the first thing you usually see, probably there's, quiet discontent, people are upset, but it's hard to maybe immediately notice. But the first sort of tangible, measurable thing you start to see is really high turnover. You just start to see people leaving all
That
over.
makes sense.
And that creates a ripple effect. Now, if you're a
I love
great
that.
culture, but here's the chicken and the egg. If you're a great culture, people like being there and they don't leave. And one of the hallmarks of a great culture is communication. So you're constantly communicating. So maybe those hidden, unspoken things start to come out and you learn about them quickly and you address them quickly and everybody's happy. That's what a good culture does. But if it's not a good culture and they're not communicating and they're not checking in and they're not transparent, then probably what happens is people are quietly upset and, they go on for a little while being quietly upset. Then they got one foot out the door and then they just start, you start to see a cascade of people leaving and then all those bad things happen.
So I think you're talking about it right now, but like we've talked about the things that can kind of lead to the problems, and there's a lot of these pieces that I think whether you're a 1 to 3 location practice or you're a giant DSO, you're feeling the same. It's just how you get the message out. It's a little bit different, but so I want to talk a little bit about solutions, which I think is what you're getting into. You hear the phrase "leading with purpose" everywhere, right? Everybody always says that now, leading with purpose, but most people, I don't think they really know what that means. Um, in a dental practice, what does leading with purpose actually look like day to day then? Obviously, one of those is getting that mission out and talking with them, but what else do we got here?
Yeah, I mean, everybody understands why we're here and what we're doing first. I mean, we've said that. I mean, just at the heart of leading with purpose is, you come up with, this is the why we're here. This is what we're doing. And everybody understands that, from the leadership down. Usually that's going to be like, we're putting patients first. We're taking care of it. But, sometimes
Yeah,
people
so I
say
was gonna
that
ask.
putting patients first. But, to me, I think to refine it, of course you want to put patients or you want to take
I was
care
gonna
of
say, does that help or is that just
Well,
marketing speak?
the difference between the ones that I think do it the best, okay, uh, couch it just slightly differently. They couch it people first. People first,
Okay.
meaning patients are people.
Richard
So's the
Branson.
front desk
Yeah.
person, so's the hygienist, so's the assistant, so's, the associate dentist. And we put our people first and we help our people and we support our people and we give them the tools to succeed, and including our patients, and then the whole thing sort of works out. And I think that's a more advanced sort of way to look at it. I certainly can't argue with a mission statement that says we're putting patients first, of course,
Of
but I
course.
think the ones that sort of do it better, they think people first and everybody first, because if the staff is taken care of, they're going to take care of the patients, and if the patients are
Agreed.
taken care of, they're going to be happy. If you just say, it can be flawed. We're just going to like take care of the patients and the hell with the staff. I mean, not that you mean it that way, but if you're just taking
Some
care
people
of the
do.
patient, it can manifest
Yeah.
itself, Ryan, in, look, you guys got to work like 18-hour shifts so that the patients are taken care of. And it might be that at the end of the day, the patients, maybe they do feel good and they feel like, we did an 8 p.m. appointment, we did a 7 p.m. appointment, but the staff is miserable because, they're being overworked, and then eventually it's not sustainable. Eventually people are going to leave and then the patients are not going to be as happy as they were. So to me, I think the more advanced way to look at it is people first. If you take care of your people first, they will take care of the patients, and then the patients will be happy and the thing just starts to operate like a well-oiled machine.
I love it. Yeah, Richard Branson, I think, was the bigwig CEO that kind of said that first, where it was like, "Look, everybody else is customer first, customer first, customer first. I treat my employees like kings and queens, and I don't even have to worry about the customers because they're
That's
going to
right.
treat them amazing. So I think that that's a brilliant way to look at it. So,
Often they're gonna
down,
treat them
yeah,
the way they're treated, right?
yeah,
If the management is treating them really, really well and empowering them and giving them lots of authority to solve things, when the time comes, to take care of the patient or the customer, they're gonna be like, "I'm gonna treat them the same way I'm being treated." And if they're being treated super, super well, then the patients are gonna get treated super, super well.
I agree. Yeah, I was actually part of a practice way, way, way back in the day, and I think anybody that works in a dental practice knows that clicks form very quickly, right?
Yeah.
And everybody talks a certain amount of smack about whatever it might be. And I was there at a time where there was a dentist had a couple of questionable things going on, and they would talk about that stuff with the patient. Like they would literally just sit there and talk about it with the patient. So I
They
think these
talk to me.
practices,
Of course,
yeah,
they know, like, all the hygienists and assistants know what I do in the industry, so they're like, "Hey, you know what Doc's doing this week?" But I mean, still, it's I've been talked to where they're
yeah,
telling me things, and I'm not gonna go spreading rumors, but I mean, they're
it's
telling
mind
me
blowing.
things that you wouldn't necessarily want them to
No,
be telling people, and that's
yeah.
absolutely correct.
Yeah, if you don't, I always say, if you think that unless you have good culture, unless you're leading with purpose within your practice, your staff is for sure talking crap about you behind your back. And this is one of those things where I think that a lot of dentists out there are just like, well, not me. I'm like, nah, you for sure. This is going on. And it sucks, but it's something that you just fix. I love these doctors out there that there's other doctors that I've met where their staff will jump in front of a bus for them because they love them so much. And like,
That's right.
that's the culture you want. And that's where you want them to be. You want them to be sad when you're retiring. You want them to break down in tears when you retire, not throw a party for the next associate to come along. Right.
No, I mean, that's how you fix it. If you have a good culture, they may talk about you because you can't stop, but they'll say positive things about you
Yeah.
behind your back. You can't stop it by being like, Ryan, you talk to this patient. That's unprofessional. I'm firing you or I'm doing this. I mean, you can, but that won't stop it. The way you stop it is by having a positive culture and where people, feel like, they're not coming to work at your place. They're working at their place. I mean, you might be the boss, but they're
I love
working at
that.
their place and they have a lot of authority to run the place and they're given authority to do things. I mean, I remember my other friend Josh Gwynn when he was CEO of Hero Dental. This was on the stage at Dykema. It's the boy with the holes in the shoes, right? If you even ask Josh this day, he's not with the organization anymore. He's moved on and he still cries. He wells up if you ask him about the boy with the hole in his shoes. And he instilled a culture over there where we're going to take care of people and take care of patients. And I think if I
I love
remember
that.
the story correctly, the boy came and he had holes in his shoes and it was cold. It's in Colorado. And I don't know, the staff was somehow asking him about why he's got all these holes in his shoes because it's cold. There's snow outside. And I think his little kid, he was being odd. The little kid just let it come out. My mom can't afford shoes or she lost her job. I think the mom was blind. I think she was blind, so she couldn't necessarily see that there were holes in the shoes. Plus
Oh,
things were
man.
tight, in the family. And there were a whole bunch of reasons. I think the kid, spilled the beans on blind. She can't see.
Kids
Plus, she
say
doesn't have
everything.
a lot of money and she can't buy it. And the staff heard this, and without even conferring, they went out and bought him shoes. Like he's in the chair, he's going to be there for an hour for treatment or something. And they run out and they buy him shoes and they put the shoes on the kid. And Josh just heard about it later. Like nobody asked his permission, nobody did
That's
it. They
cool.
just put the shoes on the kid. And if you ask Josh about that story, he wells up to this day and cries when he hears about it. But that's what happens with culture, where you instill the culture, you empower people. Those staff members knew they were empowered. Nobody thought, well, gee, if I run down here and spend, I don't know, $80 or $100 on this pair of shoes, somebody might fire me or I'm going to be in trouble. Never crossed their mind. They were like, we're here to
Love
take
it.
care of them. We're going to get the shoes. We're going to put the shoes on them. We're charging it back to the office and that's it. And that was exactly what happened. The staff members were 100% correct. In fact, they were commended for, going out and getting the
Of course.
shoes. And of course, that patient was delighted. And then the mom found out and she was delighted. And it just became a feel good story, for everybody. I would be surprised. I don't know. I'd be surprised if to this day that patient's not going back to Hero Dental as a result of that experience.
For sure. I love that. So I guess evolving that thought process a little bit, you've been a strong advocate for inclusive leadership. Practically speaking, what does that look like in a dental office on a Tuesday afternoon?
It looks the same on a Wednesday and on a Thursday and on a Friday and a Monday, okay? Because this is what I say, and I think I'm on the board of Woman in DSO and some other things as well. You can't just sort of, how do I want to say it? What's the word I'm looking for? Stage it, or just say, we're gonna, like, this is diversity day. We're gonna pretend today that we're gonna include women, or even if you do it, but you're just like, on we're thinking about it today, so we're gonna like ask women what their opinion is today. Like, no. That's got to be the way your organization operates. So when you ask me
Yes,
what it
natural.
looks like on a Tuesday, the same as it looks on, I mean, we can talk about what it looks like, but my point is it looks the same on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because you have incorporated women. You've given them if it's women, it could be anything, but you've given them opportunities. You've given them mentorship. They're part of the organization. They're integral to the decision making, and that's all day long, all the time. And if you do that, like my group at Dykema is a very diverse group, and I always include, all of the groups all the time. It's not like, hey, this particular client, care, like, this is what we hate, like in the law. Like, there's a woman general counsel, so let's show up with women. I mean, you don't think they're smart enough to see through that? I mean, what I do in
Yes.
that case, if it's important, for example, is I say, hey, these are all the women on my team that are going to be working on this all the time. Like, I didn't bring them for this thing. They're going to be like I hear a criticism sometimes. I hear it in dentistry. I hear it all over where, somebody staged this to look how it needs to look
Really?
diverse, on this occasion. But then once we commenced the relationship, we started working here, or we worked on the project, it looked very different. Yeah. You can't do that. It's got to look the same way all the time. And if I go out to somebody, whether it's a legal thing or whatever, and I introduce them to my team, that's not a staged thing. That's the team that's going to work on it. They're not here so we score points with you and we look good at the pitch and then we do something else. This is how we live. So when it looks like you have to be inclusive, and that has to be how you live. That has to be your general steady state of operations. And if that's your general steady state of operations, you're going to do well. I mean, you're going to do really, really well. But if it's just something that you pay attention to now and then to try to look
A
good,
certain
people will
month.
see through it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I completely agree. So I guess taking it one step further, so conflicts in general in office, just office, people are going to have conflicts. They happen in every office. What separates healthy teams from toxic ones? I don't think isn't whether conflict happens, it's how leaders handle it, right? What do great leaders do differently when these issues come up?
I've seen this from some great leaders, and I'm not going to tell you I'm a great, like, I'm not going to brag, but I've tried to copy it. What I'm saying is,
Say it.
I've tried to copy this. I'll leave it to others as to whether I'm doing a good job or not. But I've tried to copy. Good leaders, will let anybody speak up as long as their message has value, as long as it's a productive and helpful message. I mean, if somebody's just going to be like, I don't like working here, it's terrible, they might be like, no, I don't want to hear that. But if they're saying, I don't like being here because of A, B, C, D, and E, and these are problems for me, the best leaders will let anybody, and I've tried, on my team, to have a rule that anybody can speak up no matter what their station at the organization, as long as it's a productive comment, and as long as they're correct and in good faith in what they're saying, I will never be mad. Like, if I'm like, there used to be probably a negative culture thing, certainly in law firms and other things, where they used to say, look, if you're a first or second year, just keep your mouth shut, like, don't say anything, just sit there, for a couple years, and then when you get a little more senior, gradually you're allowed to speak up. I don't like that, because what I've noticed, a lot of the young people are directly on the front lines. I mean, they're looking at the agreements, or if it's agreements, like some of the older senior people are getting summaries, and they're getting what they think it is, and they're giving me their best, advice based on what they think it's there, but they're not like looking at it and like right on the front lines. And the young people are right on the front lines looking at it. And sometimes what they say is, hey guys, I know you're thinking it's A, B, C, D, and E, but I like looked at it and it's kind of a little different. It's always a nuance, it's a little different, and it's actually A, B, C, D, X. There's something there. And do you want to change your analysis based on that? And often I'll listen to it and I'll say, that's a good point. We thought we had this, but we kind of had 85% of it. We're missing that one little thing. And based on what you just said, because you spoke up, I'm going to tweak, now the recommendation or what we end up doing is going to be slightly different and it's better. It ends up being better. I mean, if we did an 85% recommendation, it would have been like, okay. But by taking the time to get that last detail in there, it's a superior outcome. And so to me, the best leaders don't get caught up. Like I've seen it before with some five-star generals where they walk in the room and they're the most disarming you'll ever see. They'll walk in, hey, can I get you coffee? Do you need anything? I'm probably the dumbest guy in the room. And they're like a five-star general. They're not the dumbest guy. They got medals all over their chest. They came up with brilliant things. That's why they got promoted. But they're just like, look, I'm not here because of my brains. Just talk to me like I'm a golden retriever. Just tell me stuff.
You are
Because they know. It's without saying, in my military example, the five-star general could fire somebody on the spot, have them arrested, removed from it, but they know that. They don't got to ever say that to anybody. They're the most disarming, polite people, unless, for some reason you've acted so counter to culture that they have to do it, but mostly their default demeanor, unless somebody just behaves so incredibly out of line that they have to take action, their default their default behavior or their default setting is so disarming, so polite, so welcoming of anybody, from anything, and everybody feels comfortable in that environment speaking up, and they're tolerant. Even if a young person speaks up a little and maybe, they're in good faith, but it was kind of like a dumb maybe it didn't quite fit, but you can't, you're going to let it. You're going to be patient. You're going to allow them to talk, and, maybe you're not going to take their advice because their comment was kind of silly, but you smile at them, you listen to them, and you keep going. And that's the way everybody knows that they're free to speak up because, yeah, it's true. Some very junior people in the organization, there might be 10 comments that they make, and it might be true that 6 of them are kind of silly or obvious and everybody kind of knows. But by allowing that environment where everybody can speak up, 3 or 4 of those comments are going to be really, really insightful. And if the first time a young person, even if it was like a silly comment, an obvious thing, you like cut them off and say, hey, everybody knows that. We don't need to hear that. Nobody's going to say anything anymore. So I try to be as patient as I can, let people, express their views, because a lot of time, it might only be 20, 30% of the time, but that's a lot. You get a real helpful nugget from a junior person, and you only get that if the culture is such that they can speak up. So that's what I've tried to learn from some 5-star generals. I've read their books. I've heard of their demeanor. These are some of the most powerful people in the military, but you walk up and they seem like the most nicest, disarming people you'll ever see.
It's so funny. And I'm sure you've sat in some meetings with him too. You just described for me Mark Malotek to a T. And,
He's
I
an
always call him
example. I know Mark. He's an example.
yeah, the godfather of dentistry. And he's one of my mentors. And he will sit there in meetings and go, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm like, everything and the details about all this stuff. And you're going to say that. And you're right. It is so disarming and people love it. And people will just kind of just open up. And that's how you get these deals done. So I think it's so funny that you say that because I'm in meetings with him all the time and I see it every single day. And
But
I
you
love
gotta
that.
walk the walk. You gotta understand that sometimes, and it's only natural if I tell you somebody that just started at the organization is probably gonna make a silly comment now and then, but you gotta do it. You have to do it, and you have to, let them, feel comfortable speaking up because it'll pay dividends later. I've had it with young people where I've empowered them, and, there might be a particular junior team member that probably, the first 8 times they said something, it was kind of obvious. It wasn't particularly helpful. Yeah, it probably took up time that we wish we could have used elsewhere. But the next time they said something, it was like, gosh, that was a lifesaver. They actually found something, that was really, really helpful. So you gotta let them, you gotta let everybody feel valued. Within limits, like remember, you see that commercial that we see on TV where that guy does the Georgia Bulldog bark in front of his boss. He starts barking. I don't know if anybody's seen that one. I don't
It's
know that you gotta
fantastic.
accelerate that.
Yeah.
If somebody starts barking like a bulldog, I gotta be honest, I'm probably cutting them off and we're moving on. But as long as it's a productive message or something, absolutely.
I like it. I like it. So, okay, let's look forward for a moment. We only got a couple more questions in the time because we got to keep everybody on here and pumped. So, let's look forward for a second. Are, are you optimistic about the future of leadership and culture in dentistry? And if so, what do you think dental teams will look like 5 to 10 years from now?
It's all good questions. I mean, so yes, I am optimistic about this because I think organizations have taken these unprecedented challenges of the last 5 years to get these things right. And there are some incredible leaders in our space that I've learned a ton from. We lost one recently with Stan Bergman retiring, but I know he's still on the board. But we've lost one. But there are some incredible leaders that we have that you can just learn a ton from. And I think some leaders, we don't talk about them that maybe had some challenges a couple of years ago are getting better. I mean, they know it. Like they got the message and they said, I hope I'm in this group. We got to do better about this and we got to get better. And I think, if we're talking about me, how I lead today is very different from 5 years ago. I think so. I am, optimistic a lot about the leadership and the ability of people. I mean, dentistry is a great profession. And I think we have a lot of terrific leaders. There's a lot of things, I'm putting on, you're coming soon, a leadership event I'm putting on, and we're all going to get together with leaders in the same room and learn from each other. So yeah, I do have a high degree of confidence in leadership and culture in dentistry.
Awesome. So if there's one mindset shift leaders in dentistry need to make right now, today, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of a tough question, in terms of one thing.
AI?
I think, well, that was another question you asked. What's it going to look like in 10 or 15
Yeah.
years? And I'm going to answer this. I'll answer both of them. What it's going to look like in 10 or 15 years is some leaders might be like assembly line. Like you're now the supervisor of an assembly line. Like if you went back a couple hundred years before the assembly line and you're like building something, everybody's like just working on the thing, sort of nonstop. Then the assembly line came and everybody did a discrete thing. And the amount of employees it took, went significantly down because the assembly line was building it and employees were just at certain stations on the assembly line doing a job where it might have taken 100 employees. Now it took 20 because they were just at various stations. I think dentistry is sort of going to look a little bit like that, where, you used to have people doing everything and now you've got less people supervising. Like people were on the phone verifying insurance. Now you got one person. If for some reason, like the AI has made 100 phone calls, but like two of them, they won't talk to the person, then the human being is like, all right, I'm going to intervene on these two phone calls, but 98 of them, have been done. Same thing in treatment rooms as, AI takes over and automation takes over. There's going to be a few employee like technician people that, the AI misfired. Let me reset it over here and do it again just in
Yeah.
case. But most of those functions are going to be sort of automated. And so that dovetails with your question. What is the one change you got to make now? Leveraging technology is not optional. It's essential. I mean, that's the one change. And a lot of leaders figured that out by now. But that, to me, that's the
You'd be
one
surprised.
mindset. You have to leverage technology now to compete. You got to be able to compete with a high cost of labor. You got to be able to compete with labor shortages. You got to be able to compete with a high cost of supplies and goods that are maybe even going up higher through tariffs, and the way you kind of, while reimbursement rates stay flat or only slightly increased. And the way you keep up with that is technology. Technology and innovation are the key. And I think a lot of leaders are doing this, in all fairness, but I think that's the one mindset change. If I was looking at certain organizations, they're not maybe adopting technology as quickly as I think they need to.
So Brian, for the dentist, and last question, Brian, for the dentist, office manager, or leader listening right now who's tired, stretched thin, and trying to do the right thing, what would you want them to remember about leading with purpose?
Once you get critical mass, it becomes easier. It becomes a lot easier. It's like one of those things where you're a nuclear reactor and it takes so much energy to get the thing to go. But then once it goes, you just kind of hang out and you got energy operating for, if I understand, if you do it right, hundreds of years and the energy is operating. It's the same with the culture of an organization. It was the same with my group. I mean, it's incredibly tough to get it started and jumpstart it and get the momentum and stay on top of it and make sure everything's getting through. But once that culture hits and and everybody buys in and everybody gets it, not only does the organization achieve amazing levels of productivity, but it becomes easy because other people start. In the beginning, you're the leader. You got to police it all the time. You're the traffic cop. It's like, oh my God, I'm losing my voice. Give me some tea. I'm just talking to people all day long. And then once people start to get it, and it's like positive reinforcement, they're like, this guy knows what we're talking about. We did what this guy or girl said, and now all these great things are happening at the organization. Other people will police it for you. And if somebody else is acting up, you're like, I see this sometimes where I'm like I'm about to say it, but like 7 other people have jumped the person and said, no, 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 that's not how we do it. This is how we do it. We do it here. They give them a pat on the back. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And I just go in my office and don't ever have to say it because,
Great.
sort of the culture kind of polices itself. So it'll get easier. If you're there and you're trying to do this and it's really hard and you're tired and you're even feeling a little burned out, you just got to get to critical mass and it'll get easy and it's worth it. The journey is worth it. Once you see what can be accomplished through really good leadership and culture, it's worth it. You won't be tired anymore. You'll get an extra spring in your step.
I love it. Brian, this was outstanding. Look, from what I take away from this, leadership in dentistry doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be intentional. And what you shared today, in my opinion, is a reminder that when we lead with purpose, listen to our teams, and stay patient centric, we don't have to, we don't just build better practices, we build better places to work. So, Brian Colao, thank you for joining me on Spilling the Teeth. And to everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, I'm sure it did, please share it with someone on your team. This is going to hit Brian's network on LinkedIn, so we're probably not going to have to share this at all. But at the same time, until next time, lead well, take care of your people, and keep spilling the teeth. Thanks so much.
Thank you.